The cafe was already half full when the single father walked in with his child. It was one of those small places people liked because it felt warm and quiet, with soft music playing low and the smell of fresh coffee in the air. He chose it on purpose. He wanted somewhere calm, somewhere his child could sit without feeling rushed or scared. Mornings were hard for him. They always were. Getting dressed, making breakfast, tying small shoes, answering endless questions, all of it before the day even began. But he never complained. This time together mattered more than anything. He helped his child into a chair near the window. Sunlight came in gently, lighting up the table. He wiped the table with a napkin before setting the child's cup down, careful and slow, like every small action had meaning. His clothes were simple, clean, but clearly worn from years of use. Nothing fancy, just what worked. His face looked tired, the kind of tired that sleep does not fix. Still, when his child smiled, his whole face softened. They talked quietly. Mostly the child talked, telling him about school, about a drawing made the day before, about a dream that did not make much sense but felt very important. He listened to every word. He always did. He nodded, smiled, asked small questions, and made sure the child felt heard. Around them, people came and went, ordering coffee, checking phones, rushing through their own lives. Not far from their table sat a man who stood out for all the wrong reasons. His voice was loud, too loud for a place like this. He laughed in a sharp way, the kind that made heads turn. He was with another person, but he did most of the talking. He complained about the service, about the coffee, about how slow everything was. He acted like the cafe owed him something just for being there. At first, the single father ignored it. He had learned long ago that not every noise deserved attention. He focused on his child instead. He passed over a small pastry, broke into pieces, so it would be easier to eat. The child laughed, crumbs on their fingers. He smiled back, but the loud man kept going. His voice rose higher. He started making comments about people around him, about how some parents did not know how to control their kids, about how people should not bring children into quiet places if they could not afford better manners. Each word felt sharper than the last. The child noticed. The talking slowed. Small hands tightened around the cup. The father felt it then. That shift, the kind that comes before something goes wrong. He took a slow breath. He did not want trouble. He never did. Still, when the loud man glanced over again and rolled his eyes, something inside the father told him he could not stay silent forever. When the man's voice cut through the cafe once more, louder than before, the father finally turned slightly in his chair. He did not glare. He did not raise his voice. He simply spoke, calm and steady. "Hey," he said, "could you lower your voice a little? There's a child here." The words were polite, respectful. He even offered a small smile, hoping that would be the end of it. It was not. The loud man stared at him for a moment, surprised that anyone had spoken up at all. Then his face twisted into a grin that was not friendly. "Did you just tell me what to do?" the man said, standing up slowly. The cafe went quiet in a strange way. Not silent, but tense. Forks paused midair. A few people pretended to look at their phones. No one said anything. The father stood as well, but only halfway, staying close to his chair. His child looked up at him, confused. "I'm just asking for some respect," he said. "That's all." The man laughed. A harsh sound. He looked the father up and down, from the worn shoes to the simple jacket. "Respect?" he said. "You should worry about earning some first." The father felt eyes on him, judging, measuring. Some people already seemed to assume he was weak because he did not shout back, because he did not puff his chest or threaten anything. He had seen that look before. "I don't want any problems," the father said quietly. "Let's just enjoy our morning." That was when the man stepped closer. Too close. The smell of coffee and something bitter mixed in the air. "What are you going to do if I don't?" the man asked. His voice dropped, but it was still loud enough for everyone to hear. The father did not answer right away. He looked down at his child instead. The small face was tense now, eyes wide. That mattered more than anything else in the room. "Sit back," he whispered to the child. "It's okay." Then, without warning, the man raised his hand. The sound was sharp and sudden. A slap that echoed louder than it should have in such a small space. The father's head turned slightly with the impact. A few gasps filled the cafe. Someone dropped a spoon. The child froze, eyes locked on the father's face. For a moment, time seemed to slow. The father did not fall. He did not swing back. He did not shout. He simply stood there, breathing steadily, his jaw tight. A red mark began to form on his cheek. The man stepped back, clearly pleased with himself. "Learn your place," he said. No one moved. Not the staff. Not the customers. Fear kept him still, and shame kept him quiet. The father turned fully toward his child then. He knelt down so their eyes were level. "Are you okay?" he asked softly. The child nodded, though tears were starting to form. He wiped the child's face gently with his sleeve, the same way he had done 1,000 times before. His hands were steady. That surprised some people. It surprised even him a little. Inside, memories stirred. Old ones he had locked away for years. Sounds louder than this cafe. Situations far more dangerous. He pushed them back down. This was different. This was his child's world now. And he would protect it, not with anger, but with control. Behind him, the man laughed again, mocking the silence. "Look at him," the man said to the room. "Can't even defend himself." The father stood slowly, placing himself between the man and the child. He did not turn around. He kept his focus where it belonged. The cafe felt smaller now. He could sense everyone watching, waiting to see what would happen next. And though no one knew it yet, this moment, this quiet restraint, was only the beginning. The cafe stayed frozen for a few long seconds after the slap. No one knew what to do. The sound still seemed to hang in the air like smoke that refused to clear. A few people looked down at their cups. Others stared openly, waiting for the father to explode. But he didn't. He kept his body between the man and his child. His shoulders were straight, but not tense. His hands were open at his sides, not curled into fists. His cheek was red now, the mark clear, but he didn't touch it. He didn't even look at the man right away. Instead, he turned back toward the small chair by the window. "Hey!" he said softly, kneeling down again. "Look at me." His child's eyes were wet, but there was no scream, no panic, just confusion, fear, the kind that comes when something safe suddenly doesn't feel safe anymore. "I'm okay," he said gently. "You're okay too, right?" A small nod. "That's good," he whispered. "Take a slow breath with me." He inhaled slowly, steady and deep. After a moment, the child copied him. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough. Behind them, the man gave a sharp laugh. "That's it," he said loudly. "That's your big move? Breathing exercises." A couple of people shifted uncomfortably. One older woman near the counter looked like she wanted to say something, but she didn't. A young man at a nearby table pulled out his phone, though it wasn't clear if he was recording or pretending not to notice. The father stood again, this time facing the man fully. There was no fire in his eyes, no shaking hands, just a quiet stillness that didn't fit the moment. "You've made your point," he said calmly. "Now let it go." The man stepped closer again, almost surprised by the lack of reaction. "You don't get to tell me what to do," he snapped. "You think you're better than me or something?" "No," the father replied. "I don't." The simplicity of the answer seemed to confuse the man for a second. "I just don't want this to go further," the father added. "There's no need." The man looked around at the watching crowd, almost feeding off their silence. "You hear that?" he said. "He doesn't want to go further." He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice just enough to make it feel more personal. "You're weak," he said. "That's what this is." The father didn't respond, but inside, something heavy moved. Not anger exactly, not fear either. Something older, something trained. He had been called worse before, in harsher places, by people who meant real harm. Words like this didn't break him anymore. They just revealed the person speaking them. His focus stayed steady. "I'm asking you one last time," he said quietly. "Please go back to your table." The man shook his head, smiling in disbelief. "You're not in charge here." At that moment, the cafe manager finally stepped forward from behind the counter. His face was pale, unsure. "Sir," the manager said to the loud man, "that's enough. If you continue, I'll have to call the police." The man laughed again, louder this time. "Go ahead," he said. "Call them. I've got friends. I'm not worried." That sentence landed heavily in the room. Some people seemed to shrink further into their seats. The father glanced at the manager and gave a small nod. "It's fine," he said softly. "Do what you have to do." The manager disappeared behind the counter, likely reaching for phone. The bully crossed his arms, standing there like he owned the place. "You think they're going to take your side?" he asked the father. "Look at you." The father didn't look down at his clothes. He already knew what he was wearing. A simple jacket, faded jeans, shoes that had seen years of work. None of it mattered. "My clothes don't define me," he said. The man smirked. "Sure they don't." A young woman at a nearby table finally spoke up, her voice shaking slightly. "He didn't do anything," she said. "You hit him." The bully shot her a glare, and she immediately looked down again. The father noticed. He felt a strange mix of gratitude and sadness. People wanted to help. They were just afraid. His child tugged lightly at his sleeve. "Can we go?" the small voice asked. He looked down, and for a moment, the world narrowed to that face again. "Soon," he said gently. "Just stay behind me." The man rolled his eyes. "This is pathetic," he muttered. But something had changed now. The father's calm wasn't the silence of someone defeated. It was controlled, measured, almost deliberate. His breathing stayed even. His eyes tracked every small movement the man made without seeming to. The way he shifted his weight, the way his shoulders moved when he talked. It was subtle, almost invisible, but it was there. Years ago, in a completely different life, he had learned that reacting without thinking could cost everything. He had learned that the strongest move was often the one not taken. He remembered long nights under open skies, cold wind, heavy gear, the sound of boots on dirt, orders spoken quietly but carried with weight. He had learned to read people quickly, to see tension before it turned into action. And right now, the man in front of him was all noise, no control. The cafe door opened suddenly, and two uniformed officers stepped inside. The room shifted again, like air returning after being held too long. The bully straightened immediately, changing his tone as fast as flipping a switch. "Officers," he called out, raising his hand like he was greeting old friends. "Good timing." The father didn't move. The officers walked in, scanning the room. "What's going on here?" one of them asked. The bully spoke first, quick and confident. "This guy started harassing me," he said, pointing at the father. "Got in my face. I was just defending myself." A murmur moved through the cafe. A few faces showed disbelief. The officer looked at the father. "Sir," the father kept his voice level. "I asked him to lower his voice for my child," he said. "That's all." The bully scoffed loudly. "Yeah, right." The second officer glanced at the child, then back at the red mark still visible on the father's cheek. "Did he hit you?" the officer asked. The father paused for half a second. "Yes," he said simply. The bully's confident posture wavered just slightly. "He's lying," he snapped. "He came at me." But the room was no longer silent. The young woman who had spoken earlier stood up again. "No," she said, stronger this time. "He didn't. You slapped him." Another voice joined in. Then another. "He never touched you. You were the one yelling. You hit him." The energy in the cafe shifted again, but in a different direction now. The father stayed quiet as others finally found their voices. The officers exchanged a look. "Sir," one of them said to the bully, "we're going to need you to step outside." The bully's face lost some color. "You can't be serious." "Outside," the officer repeated calmly. The father felt his child's small hand grip his jacket tighter. "It's okay," he whispered again. As the officers guided the bully toward the door, the man glanced back once more, his earlier confidence replaced with something harder to hide. But the father didn't look at him. He bent down and picked up the small backpack from under the chair. He helped his child put it on, adjusting the straps carefully. The cafe slowly returned to motion, like a machine starting up again after being paused. A few people offered quiet apologies as he walked past them. He nodded politely but didn't say much. The manager approached him near the door. "I'm really sorry," the manager said. "This shouldn't have happened." The father gave a small, tired smile. "It's not your fault," he replied. Outside, sunlight still filled the street like nothing had changed. Cars moved. People walked. Life continued. He held his child's hand a little tighter as they stepped out of the cafe. Inside, the story wasn't over yet. But for now, he had done what mattered most. He had chosen control over chaos. And that choice would soon mean more than anyone in that cafe could imagine. They walked a short distance from the cafe before stopping. The father didn't rush. He never rushed when his child was shaken. He knew that pretending nothing happened could sometimes hurt more than facing it gently. They sat on a low bench near the street, where people passed by without paying attention. The noise of traffic helped a little. It made the cafe feel farther away, like something already behind them. The child swung their feet slowly, staring at the ground. "Why did he do that?" the child asked after a long pause. The father took a moment before answering. He chose his words carefully. "Some people carry a lot of anger inside," he said. "Sometimes they don't know where to put it, so it comes out in the wrong way." The child thought about this. "Did I do something wrong?" "No," he said immediately, his voice firm but gentle. "You did nothing wrong. None of that was your fault." That answer seemed to matter the most. The child leaned slightly closer to him, resting against his arm. He put an arm around Small's shoulders, feeling the tension ease just a little. After a few minutes, they stood and continued walking. He decided to take the longer way home. He didn't want to rush back into a quiet space where memories might grow too loud. As they walked, his thoughts drifted, slipping backward in time without asking permission. Long before cafe mornings and school backpacks, there had been another life, one he rarely thought about unless something pulled it back to the surface. Back then, mornings didn't start with coffee and small talk. They started before sunrise, often in silence. Gear checked and rechecked. Movements practiced until they felt like breathing. There was no room for noise, no space for ego, only discipline. He had learned early that reacting without control could get people hurt. Not just him, but the one standing next to him. Control wasn't about being passive. It was about choosing the right moment, the right response. He had been trained to stay calm when everything inside screamed to act, to breathe through fear, to move only when it mattered. Those lessons stayed with him, even after he walked away from that world. He hadn't left because he was weak. He had left because life had changed. The loss came quietly, like a door closing without warning. One moment, the future felt solid. The next, it cracked open. Suddenly, the mission was different, smaller, but heavier in ways no training could prepare him for. Raising a child alone wasn't something he had planned, but once it became his reality, he accepted it fully. There was no backup plan, no second option, just him and a small life depending on him to get it right. That was when he promised himself something. No matter what happened, his child would not grow up surrounded by violence. Not stories, not anger, not fists or shouting. He had seen enough of that for a lifetime, so he built a quiet life. He took a regular job, one that didn't ask questions, one that didn't care about his past. He kept his head down, paid his bills, packed lunches, attended school meetings, learned how to braid hair, even though he wasn't very good at it at first. Some people looked at him and saw only what was on the surface. A tired single dad. Nothing special. He let them think that. Back in the present, they reached a small park. The child ran ahead to the swings like nothing had happened, laughter returning in short bursts. He watched closely, but didn't hover. He had learned the balance between protection and trust. As the swing moved back and forth, the child smiled again. That mattered more than anything. He sat on a nearby bench, hands resting on his knees, feeling the weight of the morning slowly lift. But his mind was still alert, always alert. Across the street, he noticed a police car from earlier parked near the cafe. The officers were still there, probably finishing paperwork, probably listening to excuses. He didn't feel satisfaction, just relief that his child hadn't seen more than they already had. A memory surfaced then, uninvited. A long hallway. Harsh lights. Someone yelling. The feeling of adrenaline rushing through his body, demanding action. Back then, action had been expected, required. Today, restraint was the real test. When the child tired of the swings, they sat beside him again, sipping water from a bottle. "Are we still getting breakfast?" the child asked. He smiled. "Of course," he said. "Just somewhere else." They walked to a smaller place a few blocks away. Quieter, less crowded. The kind of place where no one rushed and no one raised their voice. As they sat down, the child looked at him closely. "Your face looks funny," the child said. He touched his cheek lightly. It was still sore, but not badly. "It'll be fine," he said. "It'll go away." "Did it hurt?" He thought about lying, but he decided against it. "A little," he admitted, "but not as much as it looked." The child nodded, satisfied with the honesty. While they waited for food, his thoughts returned again, this time more focused. He knew situations like that cafe didn't end just because people walked away. The man who caused it didn't look like someone who learned lessons easily. People like that often doubled down when their pride was touched. He stayed alert, not afraid, just aware. He didn't want trouble, but if trouble came looking again, he would handle it the same way. Calm first. Always. Their food arrived. Simple. Toast. Eggs. Juice. The child ate happily, telling a story about a school project. He listened, responding at the right moments, smiling when appropriate. On the outside, everything looked normal again. Inside, he felt something settle. He had been tested that morning. Not physically, but in a way that mattered more now. He had been given a chance to show his child what strength really looked like. Not shouting, not hitting back, not proving anything to strangers, but standing still when it was hardest. Choosing peace when chaos invited him in. Later, as they walked home, the child reached for his hand again. "You didn't get mad," the child said quietly. He squeezed the small hand gently. "I did," he said honestly, "but I didn't let it control me." The child thought about that for a moment. "I want to be like that," the child said. His throat tightened slightly at the words. "That's a good thing to want," he replied. When they reached home, the door closed behind them, shutting out the noise of the world. He helped take off shoes, hung up jackets, and set the backpack by the wall. Life returned to its rhythm. But deep down, he knew the story wasn't finished yet. Some lessons take more than one moment to be learned, and some truths have a way of surfacing, no matter how quietly they've been buried. That afternoon passed quietly, almost too quietly, the kind of calm that feels earned but fragile. The father kept busy at home, folding laundry, cleaning the small kitchen, helping with homework. He smiled when his child laughed, nodded at every story, and answered every question. On the outside, he looked like any other parent finishing an ordinary day. Inside, he stayed alert. It wasn't fear. It was awareness. The kind that never really turns off once it's been trained into you. He noticed sounds outside the apartment. Doors closing. Footsteps in the hallway. A car engine that lingered a little longer than usual. Nothing clearly wrong, but enough to keep his senses sharp. That evening, a knock came at the door. He felt it before he heard it. A quiet shift in the air. "Stay here," he told his child softly. "I'll be right back." He walked to the door and opened it carefully. 2 police officers stood outside, different from the ones earlier. One older, one younger. Both calm, professional. "Sir," the older officer said, "we'd like to ask you a few questions about what happened this morning." The father nodded. "Of course." They stepped inside. He offered them seats, but they stayed standing. The younger officer glanced around the apartment, taking in the simple furniture, the toys neatly placed in a corner, the quiet order of the space. "We spoke with several witnesses." The older officer continued. Their accounts were consistent. The father listened without interrupting. "The man involved is claiming you provoked him," the officer said. "He says you threatened him." The father shook his head slowly. "That's not true." "We know," the officer replied. "That's why we're here." The younger officer cleared his throat. "There's something else," he said. "When we ran routine checks, your name came up. Not for anything bad." The father felt it then, that subtle tightening. He had known this moment might come someday. The older officer studied his face closely. "You served," the officer said, not as a question. The father didn't answer right away. He glanced toward the other room, where his child sat quietly, pretending not to listen. "Yes," he said finally, "a long time ago." The officers exchanged a look, a respectful one. "Special operations," the older officer added gently. The father nodded once. "Nothing more." "That explains a lot," the officer said. The younger officer looked almost uncomfortable. "The man from the cafe, when we informed him who you were, his tone changed. Quickly." The father felt no pride in that, no satisfaction. "That's not important," he said. "I don't want this to become a bigger thing." The older officer nodded. "Understood, but he's being charged for assault. Witness statements are clear." "Good," the father said simply. "Then it's handled." The officers thanked him and left without another word. As the door closed, the apartment felt quiet again, but different now. He leaned against the door for a moment, letting out a slow breath. "Who was that?" the child asked from the couch. "Just some people making sure everything was okay," he said. "Nothing you need to worry about." The child accepted the answer easily and returned to drawing. Later that night, after bedtime, the father sat alone at the kitchen table. The light above him was dim. His hands rested around a mug of untouched tea. He thought about how close the past always was, how it waited patiently, ready to surface when least expected. He had worked hard to leave that life behind, not because he was ashamed of it, but because he knew what it took from people, what it demanded, what it left behind when it was done. He had seen strong men break, good men lose themselves. He didn't want that for his child. The next morning, life tried to return to normal again. School drop-off, work, grocery shopping. But whispers followed him now, even if he didn't notice them at first. At the store, someone looked at him twice. At work, a co-worker asked if everything was okay, a little too carefully. News traveled fast in small places, even when no one meant for it to. By the afternoon, it reached the man who had caused it all. The bully sat in a holding room, anger burning under his skin. His confidence had vanished the moment he heard the truth, not because of titles or labels, but because he realized how wrong he had been. He hadn't slapped a weak man. He had slapped someone who chose not to respond. That knowledge ate at him more than any punishment could. By evening, the father received a call from a number he didn't recognize. He let it go to voicemail. The message was short, shaky, apologetic. "I didn't know," the voice said. "I messed up. I just wanted to say, I'm sorry." The father listened to it once, then deleted it, not out of anger, but because apologies given out of fear rarely meant much. That night, he sat with his child again, reading a story before bed. The child yawned, eyes heavy. "Are you strong?" the child asked suddenly. The question surprised him. "Strong how?" he asked. The child shrugged. "Like when people are mean." He thought carefully. "I try to be," he said. "But real strength isn't about hurting people back." "What is it then?" He smiled softly. "It's about protecting what matters without losing yourself." The child seemed to like that answer. As the lights went out, the father stayed seated for a moment, watching the steady rise and fall of his child's breathing. He knew the truth was out now, whether he liked it or not. Some people would see him differently. Some would treat him with more respect, others with fear. None of that mattered. What mattered was that when the moment came, he had shown his child who he really was. Not the past he carried, but the values he lived by now. Outside, the world kept moving. People forgot quickly. Stories faded. But for one man, one child, and one lesson learned the hard way, that cafe morning would never fully disappear. It would remain as proof. That quiet does not mean weak. That restraint can be stronger than force. And that sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is walk away, without ever needing to explain who they are. The days after the incident slowly settled into something close to normal. Not perfect, but steady. The kind of normal that comes after a storm, when the air still feels heavy, but the sky has cleared enough to breathe again. The father kept his routine simple. Wake up early. Make breakfast. Walk his child to school. Go to work. Come home. Repeat. He didn't talk about the cafe unless asked, and even then, he kept it brief. He didn't want the moment to grow bigger than it needed to be. But small things had changed. People looked at him differently now. Not everyone, but enough to notice. A nod here, a longer pause there, a tone that carried respect instead of dismissal. He didn't enjoy it, and he didn't reject it either. He simply accepted it as part of life moving forward. One afternoon, while waiting outside the school gates, another parent approached him, a quiet person who usually kept to themselves. "I heard what happened," the parent said carefully. The father nodded. "It's over now. I just wanted to say," the person continued, "my kids saw how you handled it. They asked me why you didn't fight back." The father listened. "I didn't know what to say at first," the parent admitted. "But then I told them, maybe strength looks different sometimes." The father smiled politely. That's a good way to put it. As they walked home that day, his child skipped along beside him, lighter than before. The shadow of the cafe felt far away now. At home, they worked on a small school project together. Paper, colors, tape spread across the table. The child focused hard, tongue sticking out slightly while drawing. He watched, helping only when asked. "You know," the child said suddenly, "I told my teacher you're brave." He paused. "What did they say?" "They said being calm is brave, too." He felt something warm settle in his chest. That night, after dinner, they sat on the couch watching a movie. The child leaned against him, sleepy but content. He wrapped an arm around small shoulders, feeling the quiet moment fully. He thought back to who he used to be, the man who moved fast, who acted without hesitation, who lived in a world where calm moments were rare and danger was constant. That man still existed somewhere inside him. He didn't deny that. He didn't erase it. He had simply learned to place it where it belonged, not at the front, not in control, but ready if ever truly needed. Weeks passed. The cafe incident became old news. The man who caused it faced consequences, quietly and without drama. There were no more calls, no more messages, no more noise. Life moved forward. One morning, the father and child returned to the same cafe, not because they had to, but because they chose to. The place looked the same. Same window, same tables, same smell of coffee. The staff greeted them warmly, a little nervously at first, then with genuine smiles. They sat by the window again. "Is this okay?" the child asked. He looked around the room, then down at the small face looking up at him. "Yes," he said. "It's okay." They ordered breakfast, talked about school, about plans for the weekend, about nothing important at all. No one raised their voice. No one stared. Just an ordinary morning. As they ate, the father realized something simple but powerful. He hadn't won anything that day in the cafe. There was no victory. What he had done was protect something fragile without breaking it. He had shown his child how to stand tall without standing over others, how to stay grounded when the world tried to shake you. That was enough. When they finished, they paid and stood to leave. As they walked toward the door, the cafe manager caught his eye and nodded once, silently, a sign of respect, of closure. Outside, the sun was bright, the street busy, life moving on. The child grabbed his hand. "Can we come back again?" the child asked. "Anytime," he replied. As they walked away, he felt lighter than he had in a long time, not because of what people knew about him now, but because of what his child knew, that strength doesn't have to shout, that control can be quiet, that the most powerful thing a person can teach isn't how to fight, but how to choose peace without losing dignity. And in that lesson, passed gently from one generation to the next, the story truly ended